The world is running out of resources and the population has dropped sharply. The movie starts with the survivor burying a body in the forest and resetting a bear trap. He goes back to his cabin, locks the doors and windows, then opens a Bible. He stares at a page, tears it out, and uses it to start a fire. Along with the pages, he burns personal letters and photos, but keeps one picture of a woman. The next day, after eating breakfast, the survivalist takes his gun and heads into the woods. He collects mushrooms and works on his small farm. He follows this routine for weeks, growing his own food and staying clean, always on the lookout for anyone who might try to steal from him. However, he seems mentally disturbed, often dreaming or imagining that someone is touching him. To cope with his loneliness, he plays the harmonica and looks at the woman's photo. Later though, he burns the photo too. One day he wakes up to a noise outside his cabin. Grabbing his gun, he cautiously checks using a mirror so he won't be seen. He sees two women standing in his garden. He goes out and points his gun at them. The older woman introduces herself as Catherine, and the younger one is her daughter Milja. Catherine offers him some jewelry in exchange for food, but the survivalist refuses. Then she offers him seeds for his farm, which gets his attention. After checking the seeds though, he still refuses because they don't seem good enough. Finally, Catherine offers her daughter for the night as a last resort. The survivalist, tempted, allows them inside, but keeps his gun aimed at them. He searches their bags to make sure they aren't a threat. Milja, hungry, asks to eat first, so he cooks them some soup. While eating, they talk, and the survivalist learns that the mother and daughter have been traveling alone. He tells them he's been living in the cabin for 7 years, but his brother who used to live with him has passed away. After dinner, he locks Catherine in the back room, but she asks him not to finish inside Milja before leaving. Now alone with Milja, they undress. As she looks at his bearded face, she reaches for a blade by the sink, which alarms him. He pins her to the wall, but she explains she just wants to shave him. To calm him down, she lets him touch her chest. After spending the night together, Milja goes back to join her mother in the back room. The next day, Catherine tells the survivalist that Milja likes him and asks if he wants to keep seeing her. He laughs it off, and when Catherine offers to help him manage the farm, he refuses, saying he's been doing fine by himself. He tells them to leave, and Catherine starts to go, but Milja stays behind and gently soaks his beard. She approaches him with a blade to shave him, and even though he points his gun at her, she carefully shaves his beard. The survivalist, now convinced, allows them to stay. He continues to be intimate with Milja, then lets her sleep next to her mother. As they help him tend the crops, Catherine keeps her eyes on his gun whenever he leaves it unattended. While Milja and the survivalist spend time in the woods, Catherine sneaks around the cabin, but all she finds is an old family photo. Catherine and Milja decide to kill the survivalist. One night, Milja secretly takes the shotgun shells from his pants and hides them under her pillow. The next morning, she gives the shells to her mother and then walks away from the cabin, leaving Catherine to carry out the plan. Catherine tries to attack the survivalist with a shovel, but before she can act, the survivalist spots a man's footprint in the soil, making him suspicious. Meanwhile, Milja, who was cleaning herself by a stream, is captured by a drifter who is attracted to her. The survivalist and Catherine rush to the stream, only to find Milja's boots left behind. The survivalist tracks them through the tall grass. As he approaches, he realizes that his shotgun shells are gone, making his gun useless. Just a few feet away, the drifter has Milja, and he shoots the survivalist in the stomach. The drifter drags Milja away, but gets distracted when he checks on the wounded survivalist, intending to finish him off. The survivalist quickly stabs the drifter in the neck, killing him. Catherine and Milja carry the wounded survivalist back to the cabin. Catherine instructs Milja to clean and sterilize the knife before removing the bullet and cauterizing the wound. Once he's stable, the survivalist grabs the drifter's gun and threatens Catherine and Milja, locking them in the back room. The next day, he lets them out, but despite their care, the wound starts to get infected. The survivalist tries to handle it on his own, but eventually asks Milja for help. The survivalist tries to manage his infection alone, but it worsens, so he asks Milja for help. As she cleanses his wound, he falls asleep, giving Milja the chance to take his gun and hand it to Catherine. Catherine suggests they should let the survivalists die from the infection, as their food supplies aren't enough for 3 people. Milja argues that they need him because he saved her, and he is helpful with their survival. Reluctantly, Catherine agrees, and the 2 women work hard to nurse him back to health. They use their body heat to keep him warm during his fever. While he's unconscious, the survivalist dreams of running through the woods with his brother, only to trip and fall begging for help. After some time, thanks to Milja and Catherine's efforts, the survivalist recovers. In the following weeks, the 3 settle into a quiet, tense routine as their crops continue to grow. One day, Catherine asks about the survivalist brother, and he explains that his brother died because he was careless. Catherine notices that Milja is becoming more attached to the survivalist and that she even initiates intimacy with him. One evening, while gathering wood, the survivalist notices lights approaching their cabin. He rushes back, secures the cabin, and tells Milja and Catherine to stay quiet. A group of 6 people tries to break in, but with only 3 bullets, the trio decides to stay hidden and wait it out. By the next day, the intruders are gone, but the group discovers their crops and supplies have been ransacked, leaving them with very little food. As they slowly starve, Milja suspects that she might be pregnant. She secretly considers terminating the pregnancy with a sterilized wire, but hesitates and ultimately decides not to go through with it. Desperation takes over when Catherine checks a trough they set using some berries, only to find that the berries are gone and no animal has been caught. Catherine, now even more desperate, suggests they kill the survivalists so she and Milja can have enough food to survive. Milja, though reluctant, finally agrees, but they decide to use poison mushrooms to make his death look natural. That night, Milja prepares a meal, adding the poisonous mushrooms to one of the bowls. The survivalist hesitates to eat at first, but eventually takes a bite. The next morning, Catherine tries to leave quietly, motioning for Milja to join her while the survivalist is still asleep. But Milja refuses. When the survivalist wakes up, Catherine informs him that she is leaving, but again Milja refuses to go. Suddenly, Catherine feels sick and rushes to the sink to vomit. Milja then admits that she poisoned her mother instead of the survivalist. Accepting her daughter's choice, Catherine walks into the woods with the survivalist. He prepares his gun to give her a quick, painless death, but Catherine asks him not to waste a bullet. Instead, she asks him to use his knife to cut her wrists after she finishes smoking a cigarette. As she smokes, she imagines the survivalist digging her grave and pulling her body into it. After a few moments, she lets herself die in the survivalist's arms and he buries her in the woods. While heading back to the cabin, the survivalist hears his bear trap snap shut. He finds 2 rabbits caught in the traps and brings them back to the cabin. While preparing the rabbits for food, he shares a story with Milja. He tells her how he and his brother used to raid camps at night without making a sound. But one night his brother couldn't control himself when he saw a girl. When the girl screamed, the whole camp was alerted. They fled into the woods, but the survivalist tripped. His brother came back to help him, but in a moment of desperation, the survivalist cut his brother's ankle to slow him down, allowing him to be captured while the survivalist escaped into the darkness. He explains that he did what he had to do to survive, just like Milja. That evening, Milja quietly tells the survivalist that she is pregnant. The next day, as the survivalist processes this news, Milja mourns her mother by holding and smelling her cigarette. One day, as Milja and the survivalist are harvesting mushrooms, the raiders return. One of them triggers an alarm, alerting the pair to their presence. Milja sneaks into the back of the cabin to retrieve their seeds while the raiders search the house. They hear Milja, but she escapes through the roof just before they enter. The raiders chase them into the woods and the survivalist manages to shoot and kill one of them. As he runs, the survivalist sees a vision of his brother Augustus. He shares his brother's name with Milja before telling her to run. He then plays his harmonica, using the sound to distract the raiders away from her. Meanwhile, Milja encounters one of the raiders and fires her last bullet but misses. Thinking quickly, she backs away, leading the raider into a bear trap. The survivalist fires his final bullet, but he's shot by a crossbow in the process. The raiders later find his body and prepare to burn it near a fire pit. That night, they set fire to the cabin, destroying everything. Alone, Milja survives in the woods for several months, her belly growing with the baby. One day she stumbles upon a concrete road and sees a guarded post. Beyond the fence, a small group of people are farming the land. She surrenders her weapon back to one of the guards who takes them inside. The group will take a vote to decide if she can join them. As she waits, Milja sees a child among the group, giving her hope for the future. A guard asks what she'll name her baby if it's a boy, and Milja pauses, thinking about the name as she considers the life ahead for her and her child.